The Galactic Council, a grand assembly of representatives from civilizations spanning countless star systems, had long held the galaxy in a careful balance. Its members handled diplomacy, monitored trade routes, and resolved disputes, their decisions shaping the lives of billions across known space. Once, the Council had been critical in coordinating efforts against existential threats, pooling the strength of diverse species to push back enemies that had threatened every corner of the galaxy. It was humanity, in one such moment of crisis, that had tipped the scales, bringing the galaxy back from the brink. But those memories had faded, blurred by time and peace. In the years that followed humanity's once-renowned victory, the galaxy settled into stability, forgetting the significance of that hard-fought alliance. Humanity's contribution became little more than legend, relegated to tales told to children and historic documents gathering dust in archives. The Council itself had grown complacent, its members viewing humanity not as heroes but as an odd, long-forgotten ally. In their eyes, humans were relics of a distant past, an old force that had played its part, now receding into the quiet edges of the galaxy. With humanity largely absent from Council affairs, other species had taken the reins of interstellar governance. Humanity had retreated to its own corner of space, content to focus on its own affairs. To the Council, this was proof that humanity's time had passed. The leading members began to believe humanity was a species ill-suited to the evolving sophistication of galactic politics. They considered humans outdated, primitive, even, especially compared to the newer, more technologically advanced members who now boasted innovations and strategies the Council thought indispensable for modern warfare and diplomacy. And so, the galaxy moved on, and with each generation, memories of humanity's might faded into the shadows of history. The younger members of the Council had only heard whispers of humanity's fabled past, stories of impossible resilience and ingenuity. But those were the tales of old wars, they reasoned, irrelevant to the Council's current objectives. Now, with advancements in weaponry, artificial intelligence, and vast fleets capable of policing entire sectors, they saw little need for the assistance of a species they barely understood and rarely encountered. To the Council, humanity had become a relic, a chapter of history best left closed. But as the Council reveled in its sense of control, a new danger began to rise. Reports surfaced of planets on the outer rim falling silent, one after another. Scout ships sent to investigate never returned, leaving only fragmentary signals filled with static and fear. Whispers reached the Council of an advancing enemy, a coalition of marauders and hostile forces who wielded technology even the Council could not fully comprehend. The few ships that managed to escape spoke of coordinated strikes, brutal efficiency, and an apparent hunger to expand deeper into Council-controlled space. Most members dismissed these accounts as exaggerated or false. They were confident in their technological defenses and secure in the knowledge that they held the upper hand. This new enemy, they assured each other, was nothing more than an opportunistic faction looking to exploit weaker outposts. The Council had faced worse threats in the past. They saw no reason to believe that this would be any different. The older councillors, though wary, struggled to convince their younger counterparts, who viewed this threat as just another minor skirmish that the Council's forces could easily neutralize. Yet there were whispers within the Council's ranks, voices of caution. A handful of representatives, some of whom had studied humanity's history in detail, urged their peers to reconsider the dismissal of their former allies. These councillors had read about humanity's contributions in times of crisis, their tenacity, and their remarkable ability to adapt. They argued that humanity might possess qualities the Council had overlooked, strengths that could be critical in this uncertain time. Perhaps, they reasoned, it was worth reaching out to humanity, if only to assess whether they could still bring something unique to the table. The Council, however, remained divided. The prevailing opinion was one of skepticism and dismissal. They had grown used to seeing humans as a passive, inconsequential part of the galaxy, no longer essential to its survival. One councillor scoffed at the idea of asking humanity for assistance, calling it a relic of an ancient era. Another member chimed in, laughing at the idea that a species so removed from galactic affairs could be of any practical help. They voted to ignore humanity, opting to rely on their own formidable forces instead. Unbeknownst to the Council, humanity's leaders had been observing the situation closely. Human intelligence networks had intercepted fragmented messages from distant outposts, gathering what little information they could on the enemy's movements and tactics. Humanity's leadership understood the nature of this new threat, and they recognized the Council's overconfidence for what it was, a dangerous blind spot. While the Council had grown complacent in their technological advancements, humanity had continued to develop its own strengths, quietly honing skills and strategies in the shadows. They had not been idle, even if the galaxy had assumed they were. Watching from afar, humanity's leaders began to quietly strategize. They understood that the galaxy's rulers had forgotten the strength of Earth, and they had no illusions about the Council's unwillingness to call upon them. If the Council could not see the value of an alliance with humanity, then humanity would simply have to act on its own. After all, they had defended the galaxy before, and if necessary, they would do it again, this time, on their own terms. A shadow swept across the galaxy as the invading force advanced, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. The attackers, a powerful coalition of war-hardened species driven by conquest and hunger for dominance, seemed unstoppable. Their warships, sleek and ominous, bristled with weapons unfamiliar to the Council's arsenal, cutting through defenses like paper. Their tactics were ruthless and efficient, showing no mercy to those who tried to resist. Rumors spread that their technology was centuries ahead, with weaponry capable of incinerating entire fleets and rendering planets uninhabitable with a single strike. Civilians and soldiers alike whispered tales of planets silenced in hours, with cities leveled, infrastructure gutted, and survivors left to flee in terror or face merciless annihilation. In their first major engagement, the Council's forces moved in with confidence, certain that their fleets could overpower this upstart enemy. They had always been able to handle smaller, chaotic skirmishes with relative ease, after all. But this was no mere skirmish. The Council's fleets were soon met by the enemy's disciplined and lethal formations, coordinated with chilling precision. Where the Council's forces relied on brute force and static tactics, the invaders struck with a fluid adaptability, exploiting every weakness and maneuvering with a terrifying blend of strategy and savagery. Council ships fell rapidly, cut down by weapons that seemed to anticipate every countermeasure. Shock rippled through the Council ranks as entire formations were annihilated before they could even react. Despite mounting losses, the Council refused to acknowledge the gravity of the threat. They called for reinforcement after reinforcement, throwing more ships, more soldiers, into the inferno, convinced that their numbers would eventually wear down the enemy. But the invaders only pressed harder, thriving on the Council's repeated missteps. Behind closed doors, Council leaders began to argue, voices raised in frustration, scrambling for explanations that would fit within their preconceived notions of superiority. How could such a force have gone unnoticed for so long? And how could they, a coalition of the most advanced species in the galaxy, be faltering against this sudden foe? To admit they needed outside help would be to acknowledge weakness, and the Council's pride would not allow that. They convinced themselves that victory was just beyond reach, that they only needed one more push, one more wave of reinforcements to secure it. Even as the reports became increasingly dire, the Council refused to budge, unwilling to consider humanity as a potential ally. They held tightly to the belief that they could handle the threat without involving a species they deemed inferior. Meanwhile, humanity watched from a distance, observing the Council's struggle with both anticipation and grim patience. Human intelligence operatives gathered data on the invaders, meticulously analyzing the attacks, studying patterns, weaknesses, and motives. Humanity had learned long ago that wars were won as much in preparation as in battle. They knew the Council's opinion of them had faded into insignificance, and they were under no illusions about the Council's reluctance to seek their assistance. As the situation worsened, the human leadership quietly met in hidden war rooms across Earth, Mars, and even a few isolated outposts on the edge of human-controlled space. There, away from the Council's gaze, they discussed the state of affairs, considering the galaxy's deteriorating stability and the suffering of those caught in the crossfire. Human scientists, engineers, and tacticians gathered to review what information they had on the invading forces' technology, pooling their insights, strengths, and preparing contingency plans. Humanity was no stranger to threats of annihilation, and they understood that when the time came, they would need to be ready. They had faced extinction before and come out stronger. This time would be no different. The Council's leaders remained stubbornly in denial. They deployed wave after wave of ships, increasing their defenses, but it was clear they were losing ground. Each day brought new reports of cities razed, Council fleets dismantled, and outposts silenced. Leaders of smaller member species pleaded for drastic measures, some even daring to suggest reconsidering humanity's involvement. But they were quickly shut down by those who still clung to the belief that the Council's power alone could halt this advance. As humanity continued to monitor the unfolding catastrophe, the human populace grew restless. On news broadcasts and social media channels, civilians and veterans alike spoke out, questioning when, if, their leaders would intervene. There was a growing demand to help, a quiet but powerful undercurrent that spoke to humanity's old urge to defend and stand up against oppression. Some remembered the legends of humanity's past victories, tales of courage and sacrifice, and whispered that it was time for humanity to remind the galaxy of who they were. For humanity's leaders, the timing was critical. They understood the strategic importance of waiting, allowing the Council to exhaust itself against the invaders, to reach the breaking point where humanity's help would be not only accepted but required. The Council's pride would not bend easily, but as losses mounted, pressure was building, and humanity's time to strike was coming. The Council's frustration boiled over in a closed-door meeting, where the most senior members gathered to discuss their dwindling options. They faced the undeniable reality that their forces were being worn down faster than they could replenish them, and many of their outposts were now little more than smoking ruins. Whispers circulated through the chambers of what might happen if humanity were asked for aid. The suggestion was met with scoffs and disbelief. But as the urgency grew, so did the voices urging the Council to reconsider. If even their advanced fleets could not repel the threat, perhaps the legends of humanity's resilience might hold some kernel of truth. As desperation settled over the Council, their pride began to crack, though they held back from direct contact with Earth. The threat loomed too large to ignore, and the Council's last illusions of superiority were fading fast. After weeks of deliberation and careful assessment, humanity's leaders finally made the call. It was time to act. The situation had reached a critical juncture, and the need for a response was undeniable. Humanity, long thought to be a peaceful and passive species, would once again take the stage. The decision wasn't made lightly. There were risks, of course, but there was no turning back now. The Council had dismissed humanity for too long, and the time had come to remind the galaxy just who they were. Humanity's military, while no longer the overwhelming force it had once been, was still formidable. They had learned from history, and from their own mistakes. Their technological advancements, forged in the fires of past wars and desperate survival, had grown beyond what the galaxy had imagined. The forces they sent were small in number but carefully selected, elite units of soldiers, tacticians, and engineers who had seen the worst and lived to tell the tale. They would not be sending a battalion to fight this war, they would send a statement. The ships humanity deployed were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Built for speed and stealth, they could move through enemy lines with uncanny precision, adapted from old human naval designs but enhanced with quantum stealth technologies and hybrid offensive systems. These ships were outfitted with energy weaponry and anti-ship technologies that could disable the most advanced enemy vessels. It wasn't brute force that humanity relied on, it was innovation. Their ships were equipped for both offense and evasion, able to strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could even react. It was the art of war at its finest, not built on sheer strength but on intelligence, adaptability, and tactical superiority. When the human fleet entered Council space, it moved like a shadow through the vastness of space, undetected and undeterred. Their target was clear, a critical outpost where the enemy had established a foothold. The outpost was heavily defended, a fortress in the heart of the galaxy, surrounded by the invaders' forces. The Council had long deemed it impenetrable, Yet humanity saw it as the perfect place to show their strength. The assault was swift, calculated, and executed with military precision. Within minutes, human forces cut through the enemy's defenses, bypassing their outer layers with a combination of stealth and clever diversion tactics. The invaders, used to overwhelming force and intimidation, found themselves outmatched in a way they could never have anticipated. Human soldiers deployed a mix of guerrilla warfare tactics, ambushes, and sabotage that threw the invaders into disarray. The human forces, operating in small units, were agile and unpredictable, striking at the invaders' weak points and disappearing before they could regroup. It was a display of tactical genius, leaving the invaders scrambling to maintain control. The council, watching from their command centers, was stunned. They had expected nothing more than a token effort, perhaps some token display to placate the human desire for involvement. But what they witnessed was something far different. The human forces weren't just participating, they were excelling. They were not only holding their own but succeeding in ways the Council's seasoned generals and advanced fleets could not. Where the Council's ships had faltered and crumbled, humanity's forces struck with a calculated efficiency that left the Council scrambling for answers. As the rescue mission unfolded, the Council's disbelief grew. The outpost that had been a symbol of the invaders' power was now in human hands, liberated in mere hours. The enemy's warships were retreating, their lines shattered by the same tactics they had once used to crush lesser species. The Council's advisors began to question everything they had assumed about humanity. The humans weren't just fighters, they were a force capable of outsmarting and overwhelming even the most advanced military forces. In a calm, measured tone, humanity's leaders sent a message directly to the Council, transmitted across every channel and fleet. The message was simple yet powerful. We're here to protect our allies, but we will not stand by when our help is needed. Do not mistake our silence for weakness. Never underestimate us again. The message was not a declaration of war, it wasn't a threat, but it carried weight. Humanity was reminding the Council and the galaxy at large of their power, their readiness, and their willingness to defend those they cared for. The Council leaders, faced with the reality of humanity's sudden resurgence, found themselves caught in an awkward silence. The reality of what had just occurred sank in. Humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed, no longer a relic of the past. They had re-entered the galactic stage not with a roar but with a calculated, devastating strike that spoke louder than words ever could. Humanity's intervention did more than just disrupt the enemy's plans. It forced the Council to confront the reality of their complacency. They had spent centuries believing that humanity was no longer a significant force, content to let the galaxy's power dynamics evolve without considering the old legends. But humanity had not forgotten its place, and they had not forgotten the lessons learned from past conflicts. They had changed, evolved, and adapted. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity was no longer the passive species they had once been. The Council leaders now understood something they had long refused to acknowledge. Humanity's strength had not waned, it had been waiting. Waiting for the moment when they would once again be called upon, when their unique blend of resilience, intelligence, and tactical brilliance would be needed. And now, that moment had arrived. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The galaxy was at war. The threat, a vicious and technologically superior species, had amassed its forces near a Council stronghold, preparing for a final offensive that could shift the balance of power across the stars. The Council's fleet was formidable, but it was clear that their conventional tactics and overconfidence were not enough to halt the invaders' relentless advance. The tide of war was turning against them, and it was time for humanity to step in and lead the charge. Humanity had already proven its mettle once, but now the stakes were higher. With the Council forces reluctantly on their side, humanity took command of the battle strategy. Despite their technological disadvantage, human forces excelled where others faltered, relying on resourcefulness and a deep understanding of unconventional warfare. The sheer unpredictability of human tactics was enough to throw even the most advanced enemy off balance. As the battle unfolded, humans quickly showcased their greatest strength, adaptability. While Council fleets relied on their advanced weapons and superior numbers, humanity's forces made use of every advantage at their disposal. They hacked into enemy systems, exploiting weaknesses with surgical precision. Their ships, designed for stealth and speed, darted through the chaos of the battle, using misdirection to confuse and disorient the enemy. Humanity's tactical ingenuity became evident as they launched guerrilla-style raids and sabotage missions, turning the tide in ways the enemy had never expected. One of the most remarkable displays of human strength was their ability to engage in close combat when necessary. While the alien invaders relied on long-range weaponry and impersonal strikes, humanity's soldiers weren't afraid to close the gap. With intense bravery and fierce determination, they stormed enemy positions, taking down key strongholds and cutting off vital supply lines. Every move, every strike, was calculated, showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. They were a force that could evolve and thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. As the battle raged on, it became clear that humanity's involvement was having an impact. The Council forces, previously hesitant and unsure of their role, found themselves reinvigorated by humanity's unyielding spirit. They fought side by side with human soldiers, inspired by their willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. Where the Council had once viewed humanity as a relic of the past, they now found themselves respecting the humans' ability to lead, to fight, and to overcome adversity. Human forces were not only fighting for survival, they were fighting for something greater: unity. The decisive moment came when humanity's forces, now working in perfect coordination with the Council's military, launched a final push against the enemy's core structures. The invaders, once confident in their superiority, began to falter. The combination of human ingenuity, unconventional warfare, and the unity of the human and Council forces was too much for the enemy to handle. Their military infrastructure crumbled as human tactics dismantled their strongholds one by one. The invaders, unable to adapt, found their control slipping, and their once formidable war machine began to break apart at the seams. As the human forces and their Council allies pressed forward, the enemy's morale shattered. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The invaders, overwhelmed by the relentless assault, began their retreat. Their military forces scattered, scrambling to escape the wrath of an alliance they had never expected to face. The once feared invaders, who had thought themselves invincible, now found themselves in full retreat, unable to recover from the shock of humanity's intervention. The battle had been a turning point, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy. It was a victory built not on the overwhelming power of a single force, but on the unity and resilience of species that had once been divided. Humanity's leadership, their strength of will, and their ability to inspire those around them had proven to be the decisive factor. The invaders were forced to acknowledge that the galaxy had underestimated humanity, and they now understood that they could not conquer a species that had the heart to fight against insurmountable odds. As the enemy retreated into the void, humanity stood victorious. The Council, once skeptical of humanity's role in the galaxy, now recognized them as a pivotal force, one capable of leading not just in battle, but in uniting the galaxy against any future threats. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and humanity had shown that their place at the top was no mere accident. They had earned it, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had learned the hard way: never underestimate humanity's power to adapt, to overcome, and to unite. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy was forever changed. The once dismissive Galactic Council, having witnessed humanity's power firsthand, found themselves humbled by the events that had unfolded. Where they had once viewed humanity as a mere relic of the past, a species whose strength was a thing of legend and myth, they now realized they had severely underestimated the humans. Their victory had saved the galaxy, and the Council could no longer ignore the debt they owed to Earth's people. The Council convened in a rare, solemn gathering, where leaders from all species who had once questioned humanity's worth now offered their formal gratitude. The proud and powerful beings who had dismissed humanity as outdated or insignificant were now admitting their mistake. They acknowledged that they had forgotten the true nature of humanity, a species capable of both immense creativity and unmatched resilience. Their victory was not simply the result of brute strength or advanced technology. It was driven by humanity's unique ability to adapt, strategize, and fight with an unwavering will to protect what mattered most. The council leaders, whose once haughty airs had been unshaken, now bowed in reverence to the humans who had changed the course of the galaxy's future. Humanity's intervention had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and it wasn't just the council that was affected. Across the stars, other species, who had watched the battle unfold from afar, began to reconsider their perceptions of humanity. They had seen a species they once thought weak lead the charge against an unstoppable force and emerge victorious. This newfound respect for humanity sparked alliances where once there were only rivalries, as other species recognized the value in forging bonds with a power that had the strength to protect and defend. The power dynamics of the galaxy shifted, and a sense of unity began to grow, inspired by the example humanity had set. Species that had previously been hesitant or distrustful of each other now found common ground, realizing that cooperation and solidarity were vital to standing against any future threats. In the wake of this shift, humanity made its own statement. The leaders of Earth broadcasted a powerful message to the galaxy, one that would echo across every system, every station, and every ship. It was a message of peace, but it was also a message of strength. Humanity declared that they were committed to the defense of peace and the preservation of life, but they would no longer allow themselves or their allies to be dismissed or taken for granted. They reminded the galaxy that while they did not seek to conquer, they were more than capable of defending themselves and their allies with unmatched determination. The message resonated deeply with the galaxy's inhabitants, who now understood that humanity was no longer a passive force in the universe. They were a force for unity, resilience, and protection, a force that would not be ignored. The Council, having been forced to confront their reliance on humanity during the crisis, began to reevaluate their role in galactic affairs. They saw the immense value in having humanity as a central force in the galaxy's defense. Gone were the days of dismissing Earth's people as an outdated civilization. The Council, now humbled, offered humanity a formal, prominent role in the galactic defense system. They invited humanity to contribute to the future peacekeeping efforts and to help guide the galaxy in a new era of cooperation and unity. Humanity, ever cautious of their place, accepted the offer, but made it clear that their involvement would be for protection, not domination. They emphasized that their purpose was to defend those in need, not to conquer or expand their own influence. The Council, understanding this distinction, agreed, recognizing that humanity's role would be one of guardianship and strength, not oppression. The final reflection on humanity's newfound role was one of profound respect. Humanity had been tested, and they had passed the test with a strength that could no longer be denied. Their ability to adapt in the face of danger, to unite in the pursuit of a common goal, and to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds had proven to the galaxy that their place was earned, not given. The galaxy would never again underestimate humanity's power to unite and defend. The legacy of that victory, and the lessons learned from humanity's strength, would echo across the stars for generations to come. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been reclaimed, not as a passive participant in galactic politics, but as a respected, powerful force that would shape the future. No longer would they be seen as a species of the past. They had shown that their strength was not only in their technology but in their hearts and minds. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they would never again be dismissed. The stars would remember the day humanity stepped forward, and they would know, never again would they forget humanity's power.